Hey everybody, welcome to the Crit House. I am Jeff Larson, and we are continuing with our My Five series where we have photo professionals come in and talk about 5 images that have some meaning to them, may have influenced their artistic careers. And we are now talking to Crista Dix, who is the executive director, I hope I have that title right, of the Griffin
Indeed.
Museum of Photography. Crista, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun. I can't wait.
It is going to be fun. I have to say, when I put together my list of like who I wanted to come on the Crit House talk about this, you were like right at the top. So,
Oh, well,
yeah.
flattery will pretty much get you everywhere.
Well, get ready for some flattery. So Krista, yeah, the Griffin Museum is sort of it is a great resource for photographers and other people who are interested in photography in the Boston, the New England area. And you've been there for a few years now. Can you tell us a little bit about like who you are as in the photographic world, what your history
Sure.
is, and yeah.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a fan of photography. I'm a failed photographer. I don't know if you ever failed, but I
Oh,
loved
I'm a failed
photography.
photographer.
I got a degree in geology, and I spent a lot of time out photographing road cuts and anomalies and all that kind of stuff. And I really love being outside. So I said, this might be really interesting. I come from a creative family and maybe I can do this. So I tried to be a photographer and realized way early in that there was not that I was not that going to be that great, but I did love photography so much and had a business background. So I opened my own gallery in 2005 called Wall Space, and I ran Wall Space in Seattle until 2009. And then I opened a second location because of anything, I am ambitious. And so I opened a second location in Santa Barbara in 2010, and then ran both spaces until about 2015. And then in 2015, I became a private dealer and I did artist talks and art fairs and all that kind of good stuff. So I've been around for a while. When I had the opportunity to come to the Griffin, I mean, who does not want to come to the Griffin, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
To work for the legendary Paula Tongarelli. So I had the great pleasure of working with her for 2 years. And then when she retired, I applied for the job and somebody thought I was able to do it. So they gave me the job. And here I am a year and a half later into my tenure as the executive director of the Griffin, this hallowed ground. I feel very lucky every day to be in this building.
So we've asked you to talk about 5 images, and given your history and what you do with the Griffin and everything, it must have been kind of a tough choice to choose just
Oh, it
five
was
images.
impossible. It was
Yeah.
impossible. It took me weeks to figure out what it was that I wanted to talk about because I look at things, I live at the intersection of science, technology, and creativity. So I thought, oh, that's going to be easy. I'll just pull 5 of those. And I thought, well, that might be boring for somebody. So, then I look at all the things that I jury for other people and the amount of images that I see. So what I decided on were 5 images that really were um, important in my trajectory into where I am now.
So, Chris, the image that you chose first is from the great Edward Curtis from a long time ago, and I have to say I know Edward Curtis. I've never seen this image. This is tell us about why you've chosen this one.
So this is one of my absolute favorites. Way, way, way back, before I opened Wall Space, and when I was thinking about being a photographer, I lived in Jackson, Wyoming, and I was it was a magical place to be. I worked as a photo assistant. I worked in the parks. I worked in town. They had an amazing museum, or they have an amazing museum there, the Jackson Hole Museum. I went up across from the Elk Range and I walked in the door, and Christopher Cardozo had curated a selection of Edward Curtis's work. I was mesmerized. I couldn't stop looking at the work. I know much later now how complicated a conversation the work is from Edward Curtis. But in the meantime, he really did create these unbelievably beautiful, luscious images that I could really investigate. And portraiture was not something that I was necessarily fond of, but I couldn't stop looking. And this particular image, Watching the Dancers, is one of my all-time favorites, and I obsess over it. And at one point wanted to try and buy it, but of course, there's no way. I'd have to sell my house in order to afford it. One of my artists that worked with me at Wallspace, the great Ron Reeder, found it as a open source or at the Library of Congress, and he made me a platinum palladium print of this, which I have hanging in my home. So I actually have an Edward Curtis reader in my house now. And one of the things many artists always talk to me about, what is it when I see an image, or how do I make a decision about curation or any of that kind of things? And what I've always said is that my heart has to stop, or I have to stop breathing. And this exhibition did that for me. So I have been a lifelong fan of this work, and this image makes me feel like I'm home.
Aline Smithson, your second.
Aline Smithson is the best thing that ever happened to me.
A lot of people say that, actually.
A lot of people say that. I mean, she is amazing. So when I first opened the gallery, I couldn't get into Photo LA, which was the biggest art fair for a long time in Los Angeles. It's where everybody went and made their mark. So since I was on the waiting list and couldn't get in, I went ahead and I bought a full page ad in the catalog. And so I created this ad, I put it in, I made it down to the show and went wandering around. And about a week or two after the show, I get this packet from Aline Smithson. And this is one of the first images that I saw. It was like I knew I had found my kindred spirit. And so I called her immediately and we started talking. I had only been open for maybe a year at that point. But I was like, I don't know what we can do, but let's try and do something together. I can't stop looking at this work. I think it's really clever. And we were on the phone for probably an hour and a half. I knew that this was someone that I couldn't wait to work with. And we've been working together ever since.
Yeah. So, I mean, Aline, so in case folks don't know, and I don't know her that well, but she is the founder of Lens Scratch. She is an educator in addition to being a very talented artist as well. And I believe she does, in fact, I know she does some curation for different galleries around the country as well.
She does. Yeah. She is the full package, as one would say.
Yeah. An impressive person.
Especially as a pillar of our community.
Yeah. Oh, and Aileen, we'd love to have you on the Crit House at some point. So Richard Misrock is your third image, and this is from the Desert Kento series.
So this actually is the first image I ever really wanted to purchase. I found it at Gail Gibson's gallery in Seattle. She had a show of his work, and I live for the desert. I feel at home there. I also grew up in theater, so it really hits every single point for me of everything about everything who I was at that moment and where where I could live. I felt like I could just live at this drive-in, that I had been there before. It felt like home. And, I'd never really wanted to buy a photograph. I know a lot of people sit there and think, well, I could go shoot that. And, my answer is always, well, you didn't, you look at it and you're like, oh, I could do that. And then you don't. Yeah. Or, oh, I have that one right at home. And if somebody says, oh, I've seen that before, I've got one just like that at home. I have an artist who believes that if they ever hear that phrase, they go home and they throw out that image and try to do it again, because they never want to create something that someone's ever seen before. So for this one, for me, just was a moment like, oh, okay, I can start collecting now.
Your fourth image is from, is it Lou
Bolin.
Lou Bolin.
So this is a story of craziness. I love this work in its creativity. I love what it stands for. The idea of trying to recognize the China that Lou Bolin lives in, trying to understand how fast it changes. I've been to China a few times, and one time was specifically to go see Lou Bolin. So I did a studio visit with him. Wow. Which was literally the craziest story in the world. So I found myself a translator and someone that knew Lou, and so they said, oh, we can take you to him. We'll take you to his studio. It's completely dark. It's probably 20 degrees. The good news was I had my partner in crime, Ann Jastrab, with me at the time. So as many of you, I'm sure, know, Anne Jastrab is a whole party in one package as well, and everyone's best friend. And traveling with her is the most amazing experience. Should you be so honored to travel with her? So the two of us get in this car. It's pitch black, and it never occurred to me that there would be no streetlights beyond Beijing. So we're driving in darkness on a street that I cannot see through these trees that I feel like we're driving across a field. It's the craziest thing. We drove for 45 minutes. We're dodging donkey carts. We're dodging, people on horseback. I'm thinking I'm being either going to die or be, go off into the vanishing woods forever. So we arrive at this warehouse complex where there are no lights. We get out in the darkness, and here is this 10-foot tall human being introducing himself to me, and that's Lou. And then we went through a studio visit. We looked at the work. And what the other thing that he had in his studio were these massive sculptures. At the time, he had created world leaders attached to propane tanks. And so the installation was their hair would light on fire, or it was unbelievable. It was clearly a moment I will never forget.
Really?
So business was finished. We all chatted and said, thank you so much. And then my driver said, you're on your own, find a taxi. You shouldn't, you should grab a taxi. I'm thinking, are you kidding? I said, no. You're getting us back to Beijing. That was not the deal, that you were going to dump us off here. So he said, all right, I'll take you to an intersection and you can get a cab back into town.
Yeah, that's not good.
And Anne and I are looking at each other like, we're dropped off at a dark intersection with one light bulb illuminating probably 5 different roads. I try to hail a cab, and the translator says, no, you don't want that one. I'm like, okay, how would you know? But okay, I'm going to trust you. So the next car comes through. He hails the cab, and Anne says, if you were taking your parents for Beijing Duck, where would you go? And so the translator gave an address to the cab driver, and we were dropped off in Tiananmen Square 40 minutes later.
Wow.
So China is fascinating to me. This image just sort of encapsulates everything about China. When I would go walking through town, a hutong would be there one morning, and then next morning on my walk, it would be gone, and something else would be there. And I think one of the things that Lou is specifically talking about here that I think is important is holding on to history, or holding on to a culture that is fast vanishing.
Well, that is a fascinating story, and a little terrifying. I'm glad you're still with us to have made it through there. So Roy de Carava is your 5th image. Amazing shot. So talk about this one and why this is here for you, Crista.
So after a million years looking at images, you see the same things over and over and over. You see things every once in a while. You get that spark of something that's really exciting to you. And one very rainy day, I had the day off here at the Griffin, and went up to the Addison. And the Addison had an exhibition of Roy's work.
I saw that. Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. I had never seen the work before. I hadn't been exposed to it in a larger way. I probably had seen the images before, but never had a name to the image. And this image stopped me in my tracks. You remember that not breathing thing?
Yes.
This was it for me. Again, portraiture is so complicated. When I wear 2 different hats. So if I wore my wall space hat, I would look at this and say, all right, who's going to buy a portrait of 4 women, right? I mean, it's going to take a very special client to say, yeah, I want that on my wall. Why? Because most people are like, I'd rather put up my kids. But someone that loves photography or that connects emotionally, there's everything about this image to me that we can connect emotionally to these 4 women. Unbelievable. I just stopped for a second, and my mind quieted, and I became part of this very intimate experience. And so that's why this one really was important to me in how I think about work, how I look at work, and how I experience it.
I honestly thank you for coming on because, one of the things about this little show that we're doing is that we get a lot of people who are photographers, and we get some people who sort of have other viewpoints on things, whether it's a publisher or an editor. But having somebody with your particular experience as a gallerist and a curator, I think it's valuable for somebody like me to see and hear and to have an understanding. I mean, just that short minute where you said what you think about when you're putting something on the wall. Who's the customer? Who's going to
Right.
buy this? That's not anything I think about. I'm just going out taking pictures, right? And it doesn't cross my mind that somebody else would look at it from any other perspective than one that's similar to my own. So everybody out there, thank you so much for watching the Crit House. We greatly appreciate your viewership. If you are interested in putting your images up onto Instagram and using the hashtag #my5, please do so. And perhaps we'll have you on the Crit House, especially if you are to tag us at the Crit House. And Crista Dix, again, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you all for watching the Crit House.